For this story, I'm going to keep my identity anonymous. I run a rather successful welding and metal construction company down here in Nevada, and I would prefer it if my name not be attached to any such thing. If you can respect that, you have every right to use my story for your podcast. I was driving to my workplace around 5 in the morning. I can't remember the time of the year, because this was years back, but the sun was just coming up. It was kind of in that twilight hour of the morning, where it's not quite dark, but it's not quite bright. I was almost at work, and coming across a sharp bend in the road, when as I made the turn, my headlights illuminated a figure, what I believed to be a man, standing just beyond the reaches of the road. He must have come up from the ditches below the road, but as my headlights hit him, I realized there was something wrong. While I couldn't exactly tell his skin color, or if there was anything wrong with him, he was covered in animal skins, and had these large skulls wrapped all over him. I thought it was the strangest thing I'd ever seen, and I only caught a glimpse of him for maybe a second, but it was enough to send a chill down to my stomach. As soon as I turned, I kinda had to realize for a second what I saw. Maybe a second had passed, maybe 2 since I saw him. Looking back in my rearview mirror, he was gone. There was nothing, nobody there. There's no way that that could have happened. There's nowhere for him to drop down and run without me having full view of him anywhere. I remember saying to myself, "What? What happened?" And I nearly turned my car around, just trying to figure out exactly what I saw, thinking that I was just far too tired that morning and in desperate need of more coffee. I rushed quicker to work, hoping to get another cup, and hopefully not having to deal with that again. Well, another few weeks goes by, and I'm going again in the morning. And just so you know, since I run that business, I like to show up at my work around 5 in the morning to get everything going. I want to refrain from holding out any important details about where my whereabouts are for work. And at this point, since it's been a few weeks, I had almost entirely forgotten about my little visual that happened a few weeks prior. But as soon as I get near this very same bend in the road, I see him again. Except this time, instead of standing off to the side of the road, like he was the first time, he was actually walking towards my vehicle in the very middle of the road. My headlights were full on him, and I could see much better now. He was in the exact same uniform or animal skins he had last time, and although I couldn't see his face, and he had what appeared to be human skulls draped around his body, which was disturbing enough, his eyes and face were kind of covered, although I could faintly see a red glow coming from where his eyes were. Not saying he had red eyes. I don't know what it was, but I do recall there being a faint glow, that's for sure. And as I got closer, I began to press on my brakes because, well, he was right in the middle of the road, walking, casually, towards the direction of my vehicle. I nearly halted on my brakes and rolled out my window, getting ready to scream at him, yell, "What are you doing? Why are you walking by yourself out here at 5 in the morning?" But before I can do that, before I can even come to a full stop with my vehicle, in one solid fluid motion, this man dropped down to all fours, like it was natural, and ran off with a speed unlike anything I have ever seen. He took off and veered off the road to the right, down into the sagebrush, and was gone. I just sat there with my car idling in the middle of the road, with my foot on the brake, and my mouth and jaw down into my lap. I have no idea what I saw. That entire rest of the drive to work, and I can remember that entire day at work, was hard to focus, hard to work. Even taking clients' phone calls was difficult. I do remember leaving early, and later on that afternoon, came down with a terrible flu, or what I thought was a flu. The symptoms were flu-like, and I was as sick as a dog for about 4 days afterwards, where I appeared to recover, and was just fine. Since then, I've taken that same road many times because it's really the only road that gets to my workplace. I haven't seen this mysterious man since this all happened, and I hope I don't again. I've heard legends in this area about the natives talk about skinwalkers and shapeshifters. While I always just thought it was a bunch of stories, I guess there is some truth to their tales after all. Maybe I did indeed encounter a real-life shapeshifter. Somebody who actually practices real magic and can take on the form of any animal they please. While this man didn't take on the form of an animal, the way they quickly dropped to all fours and ran off seemed so natural, just like that of an animal that normally is four-legged and quick. No human can naturally go that fast on four legs. Something was going on. After telling some of my very close friends about the story that I'm about to tell you, they tell me that I dealt with a Wendigo, but I'm not entirely too sure. So, I thought I would message somebody like you, who appears to be an expert on the subject. After all, with how many episodes of encounters and stories you have, I'm sure your knowledge is worth something. My first experience with a Wendigo was when me and my family lived in our old house. I lived in this same house from the ages of 12 to 19 before I went off to college. And I want to say the very first time, I think I was 14, and it was a very, very cold winter this year. That much I do definitely remember. I had woken up early in the morning hours of the night to go to the bathroom, which, at the time, the bathroom was right next to my bedroom, whereas my parents' room was on the opposite end of the house. Very convenient for being a teenager, you know, loud music, having privacy, etc. And for me, having my own personal bathroom, while it was still the family bathroom, but having it be right next to my bedroom was a luxurious convenience. So, after going pee, going back and laying down to bed, sometimes I have a hard time settling back into sleep, and I can be rather restless. I wouldn't be surprised if I had a little bit of insomnia, which I still think I battle to this day. But as I was trying to get nestled back into sleep, I began hearing a familiar voice, calling my name. Except there was one major thing that was wrong. It was coming from outside. The voice that was familiar was my aunt. My dad's side of the family lives on the opposite side of the country, and we don't see them much. But my mother's side, her sister, my aunt, I am very close with, even now to this day. She comes over often, and we usually go and do a lot of family stuff. And I knew there was something about it, that I knew it wasn't her. I kept hearing her voice, calling my name, calling me to come outside, and to follow her. Except the only problem is her voice sounded wrong. It sounded not right. And there was also a blizzard. At the time, we probably had at least 2 or 3 foot of snow already, and it was snowing even more. Like I said, it was a rough winter, and this was only one of the many storms we got that winter. I figured there was no way my aunt would be outside at 1:30 a.m. in the morning while a blizzard was going on. Not to mention the weird noises along with her voice. The whole thing really creeped me out. But I chalked it up to my imagination and tossed and turned and tried to ignore it the best I could. But after maybe 10-12 minutes of this voice calling my name, it began to sound closer, and then changed from my aunt's voice to my mother's voice, calling me to come outside. That's when I was even more curious. I shot up out of bed, looked out my window, and for the first time, I was able to pinpoint a shape or a figure to the voice. Standing up back by the tree was this tall, lanky figure that looked nothing like my mother. And because it was dark out, and the bare reflection of the snow, I couldn't see any details of the face or body or anything that would accurately tell me what it was I was looking at. I immediately got the creeps, and every hair on my body and head stood up out of fear. I ran back in bed, with it still calling my name, but whatever it was never came closer to the house. Soon after, I must have fallen asleep. The next morning, I heard nothing, felt nothing, and that was that for the time being. Then, this happened again, later on. I was a sophomore in high school at this point, so probably 15, 16, I want to say. Maybe it was 2 winters later, and we had another bad winter. After the very first incident, I made no mention of this to my parents because part of me assumed it was just a bad dream, or that I had maybe just heard noises out of my own sleeplessness. But this second account confirmed to me that there was indeed something. This time it was much earlier in the night. I was staying up late, maybe about 10:30 at the time, playing video games, when I heard my father's voice outside calling me, much farther away than where the first time I heard the voices come from, which was out back by the tree in our backyard. Immediately, I was brought back to the very first account that I had, and disturbing as it was, because I had already said goodnight to my father about 45 minutes prior, so I knew him and my mother were in bed together sleeping. There's no way my father could be outside my bedroom. I jumped up again after pausing my game, looking out, and due to it being snowy, not as snow as much as last time, but still snowy and cold, and no reason why my father would be out here at 10:30 at night in the snow at the very far end of my backyard. I looked but didn't see anything else this time. That alone creeped me out. So I ignored it once again, put my headphones on, put on some music, and continued playing video games. That's when, about 45 minutes after that, I began hearing tapping on my window, and hearing my father call for me from a distance. I ignored it, although I was completely terrified and shaking, not knowing what I should do. Who should I call out to? I threw my controller down, ran into my parents' bedroom, waking both of them up abruptly, and telling them, "I'm hearing voices coming from outside our window, and they sound like you, Dad." He immediately got up, runs outside to the back door, turns on the light, and looks around. There's nobody. No signs of anybody being around. He goes and checks my bedroom, opens my blinds, and sees nothing. That's when he tells me, am I sure that what I heard was what I heard? And I agree. Then I just decide to turn in early, and he tells me to keep an eye out. Well, since then, I've had other little incidents here and there, or coming home from school, or taking out the trash. I'm pretty sure I can hear my voice being called again, by either my mom or my dad, but those 2 times were the most standout ones to me, while every other time, which by the way happened quite often, were just little ones here and there, that I learned to ignore. And this happened all the way up until I left for college at 19. So this begs the question, did I encounter and deal with firsthand a Wendigo, or was this a Skinwalker? I'm not exactly sure, but it was something, and most definitely not my parents or my immediate family.